One of my favorite aspects of Dune really has to be the Bene Gesserit, this secret society that exists in the shadows of the great houses. But when you pull back the curtain, you realize that they exist in the shadows of everyday life. For instance, every single great house in Dune has a representative for the Bene Gesserit. Typically, the women of those great houses are members of the Bene Gesserit, whether out in the open or in secret. But it's not until Dune Part 2 that you really start to realize the absolute scope of the Bene Gesserit's control. Now, in part one, we are told that there are two sides to Arrakis. There's the northern side, where Arrakeen, the capital, and the Harkonnen slash Atreides forces occupy. And then there's the southern side. And the southern side is racked in this gigantic sandstorm that you cannot fly through. And it is extremely difficult to land craft on that side of the planet as well. But in part two, we are introduced to the fact that the Bene Gesserit have people who basically have become a part of Fremen society that exist there to move the Bene Gesserit's plan forward. That these people, these women, they have been there for hundreds of years, fermenting this religious zealotry within that of the Fremen, of this idea that one day this savior will arrive who will lead them into the promised land, and all of these signs that surround this savior. But it's not until Jessica herself becomes a member of the Reverend Mothers for the Fremen that you see just how diabolical of an organization they actually are. Where, as she's talking to her baby, she's talking about the fact that she can't go after the strong first. What she has to do is go after the weak, the people who doubt, the people who are afraid, because through their fear, they're more susceptible to believe. And so she begins to cultivate these individuals. And slowly but surely, these individuals begin to cultivate their friends, their loved ones, their fellow warriors, until more and more people begin to believe in Paul. And as Paul goes out and he accomplishes these great tasks and he beats the Harkonnens and he begins to show the Fremen that he may be the person that's able to lead them to this destined promised land, the manipulation of Jessica becomes stronger and stronger, and it becomes even more crazy when she leaves the northern side of Arrakis and she goes to the southern area. Because once she arrives in the southern area, it's said that the Southerners are far more religious than those in the north. Those in the north don't believe in the religion that was brought with the Harkonnens, that was preached upon them by the Atreides. They are free. They believe in their own strength, in their own martial might. But those in the South who have to struggle in order to survive, who live in a inhospitable environment where there isn't enough water, where there isn't enough food, where they have to fight tooth and nail every single day to basically survive, are more susceptible to this religious idea that someone will come along and part the desert sandstorm that surrounds them, who will lead them to places of water and life and bring them to that of the promised land. When Jessica arrives, she instantaneously gets to work making sure that the person that they're going to be turning towards to look at as their future leader is Paul. And we see an even bigger shift in regards to Paul when he arrives amongst the southern Fremen, where he takes it upon himself, the blood of the worm into his body. And upon his awakening, the way in which he speaks to them is far more disrespectful. Funnily enough, I thought that it was a really good job to show that Paul beforehand, before he arrived in the South, was humble. But once he arrived into the South and he had taken the blood of the worm into his body and he began speaking to the Fremen, he was far more direct, far more blunt, far more rude. And it almost felt as though the Fremen were going to revolt, that they were going to attack him, that they were going to kill him. But then as he walks around, he uses his power to continue to deceive them. What they perceive as essentially this godlike being, this chosen one, that he's recalling their ancestry from the past, and he's speaking with that of the spirits of those who essentially died, is basically Paul using his ability to look into the future to choose exactly what he's supposed to say in order to get this person to be devout. And then he does it again, and then he does it again, and then he does it again, and sure enough, within minutes, he's converted an entire religious zealot sect of Southerners, millions of them, possibly billions of them, into becoming his fervent soldiers. And it's one of my favorite lines is, I think it's Paul who says this, but he says that in the beginning I was surrounded by family and friends. Now I only have followers. And I love that the change that they made to Chani, which is she's the one that chooses not to bow to him, that she's the one who saw Paul for who he was before, and she realizes that he's not the savior, but he's chosen to take advantage essentially of her people, is what sets her on her own path and causes her to leave. But it's the idea, like I said, like of villainy in Dune, and the fact that these people, the Bene Gesserit, Lady Jessica, Paul themselves, are willing to exploit human beings in order to achieve their own ends. Where you believe that Paul is on a hero's journey because he needs to avenge his fallen house. Sure, there are many heroes' journeys that are essentially that, where the hero loses his friends and family and he has nothing, and then he has to get back to basically where he was before and defeat this big evil that took everything away from him, until you realize that Paul's hero's journey ends when he kills the Emperor. Correction, when he kills Baron Harkonnen. That is the revenge quest. That was the hero's journey. But then once that is done, you expect him to put down the power, step away from the power, and probably work with the Fremen in order to rebuild their society. Instead, he turns all of these people that are now devout to him, that are now loyal to him, that have essentially decided that they will die for him, into his sword, and points it in the direction of the entire universe. Like, it is no joke when people sit down and say that Paul Atreides is a villain, because upon deciding that he was going to take these people that are thirsty and hungry and starving and turn them into his war bond and point them in the direction of the stars and sacrifice millions of them, to sacrifice billions of them, where they will raise entire worlds, where they will slaughter billions of people to make him the emperor of the entire universe, is insanity. And I cannot harp on it more than enough that I love the fact that the person who turns around and leaves is the person in the room who loves Paul the most, which is Chani. Her decision to leave is the fact that she realizes that the man that she essentially loved died the moment he crossed over into the South, the same way that he told her that he would lose himself, and that the person in front of her is the monster that she was always afraid was going to show up and enslave her people. And now her people are just that. They are enslaved. They are enslaved to religion. They are enslaved to this idea. They're enslaved to essentially the charisma of this one man. And the amount of blood that they're about to shed is completely unfathomable. There's a couple more videos that I actually want to do talking about Dune, because like I said, Dune is absolutely fantastic in every way, shape, and form. But we're going to be getting back to basics, taking certain aspects of movies and shows and just talking about them on the channel. Welcome back to Blurredly. It's nice to have you. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.